A struggling single father showed up at a stranger's door, desperate for a bottle of milk for his hungry child. What he didn't realize was that the woman holding the baby in her arms, calmly nursing and humming a lullaby, wasn't just kind. She was a millionaire, and what happened next would change both their lives forever. The kitchen was filled with a cold, flickering light from the overhead bulb that barely stayed on. Daniel stood at the sink, one hand resting on the counter, the other clumsily mixing powdered milk into warm water. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from exhaustion pressing down on his chest like wet cement. The faucet was still running. Water overflowed from the measuring cup. He didn't notice. His red-rimmed eyes from many sleepless nights were fixed on the tiny high chair on the floor. Inside, 5-week-old Noah was crying, his face flushed, little fists waving in the air, legs kicking wildly as if the world had betrayed him. Daniel bent down, holding out a bottle with desperate hands. "Come on, buddy, please, just a little," he whispered, his voice choking. "Please, Noah, Daddy needs you to eat." Noah turned his head, clamped his mouth shut, then let out a sharp scream that pierced Daniel like glass shattering. He dropped the bottle from his hands. It crashed onto the tile with a loud clatter and rolled under the cabinet. Daniel collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor, arms hanging loosely at his sides. His breath was shallow. He looked up at the ceiling as if praying to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. "God, I don't know what else to do," he croaked. "I can't lose him too." His wife, Mary, had died from a rare complication just days after giving birth. One minute they're planning the future, and the next you're holding her lifeless hand in a sterile hospital room. The pain never fades. It clings to every breath, every movement. And now this. Noah, born premature, tiny and fragile, refusing to drink formula. He'd tried everything. Different brands, different temperatures. Walking, rocking, singing lullabies at 3 a.m. But Noah only wanted one thing, something he couldn't have anymore. His mother. Daniel bent down, gently picked Noah up, held him close to his chest, whispering softly, rocking slowly. But the baby kept crying, hoarse and nonstop. That night, when Noah finally whimpered himself to sleep, Daniel sat in the dim living room light with his phone. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Shame burned beneath his skin, but desperation won out. He opened the local parents group he'd joined on a whim. Most posts were harmless, playdate invites, teething questions, old advice. His heart pounded as he began to type. "My name is Daniel. I'm a single dad. My wife passed away after giving birth. My son Noah was born premature. He refuses to drink formula. I've tried everything. Please, does anyone have breast milk to share? I'm willing to drive and pay whatever it takes. Please message me if you can help." He hit the post button. The minutes dragged on. Every second felt like agony. He refreshed the page twice. Then once more. No responses. Then his screen lit up. A private message from Claire E. No profile picture. No bio. No posts. He opened it. "I saw your message. I have breast milk safe, stored, and recent. I recently lost my child. I have more than I need. No payment necessary. Just trust me. If you're willing, I can help." Daniel blinked as he read the message. His heart raced. He clicked on the profile again. No posts. No pictures. The name was all he had. He typed back, hesitating for a moment. "Thank you. Can we talk more? I just need to make sure it's safe." The reply came immediately. "Of course. I understand. Ask me anything." He stared at the screen, feeling something strange stirring inside him. There was something in her voice, not just kindness, but familiarity, like someone else had stared down the same kind of loss. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, Daniel held Noah close, eyes fixed on the name, Claire E. He whispered in the dark as the baby stirred in his sleep. Maybe this was something. The path into the woods was narrow and winding, dusted with fresh snow. Daniel drove slowly, headlights casting long shadows on tall trees wrapped in the silence of winter. His hands gripped the wheel tight. In the back seat, Noah whimpered softly, bundled up but restless. Tiny sounds breaking the quiet like cracks in glass. The address Claire sent led him to the town's outskirts. where the house sat remote and heavy with silence. When he stopped at the gate, his breath caught. A large old manor, ivy curling over stone walls, windows dimly glowing with warm light. He parked by the walkway and hesitated. The wind cut through his coat as he stepped out, holding Noah tight. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. "This is crazy," he thought. "What if this is a trap?" Fear tightened in his chest, but then Noah shifted, letting out a weak cry, and instinct took over. Daniel raised his hand and knocked. The door creaked open almost immediately. Light spilled out across the snow-covered porch, and there she stood, Claire. Her long blonde hair fell around her shoulders, the ends brushing the soft folds of a white knitted sweater. She looked fragile, pale-faced, cheeks hollowed by unhealed grief, but it was her eyes, deep as the ocean, edged with the kind of exhaustion only loss can bring that steadied Daniel. In her arms, she held a doll, a lifelike newborn doll, dressed in soft vinyl skin and a knitted hat. Daniel froze. "I'm Daniel," he said, his voice barely louder than the wind. "I'm here because of this message." Claire looked at him for a long moment, not with surprise, but with something gentler, more understanding. Then she nodded and stepped aside. "Please, come in." He entered cautiously, the warmth of the house wrapping around them. Inside, it was quiet. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting a gentle glow across the living room. Walls lined with bookshelves. Framed pictures sat atop the mantel, mostly landscapes, but one stood apart. A photo of a baby boy wearing a hospital knit cap. Claire gently set the doll on a chair by the fire, then turned back to Daniel. "Would you like to hold him?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Daniel hesitated a second, then handed Noah over, arms trembling. Claire cradled the infant with natural grace. She sat in a rocking chair near the fire, adjusted her sweater, and placed Noah against her chest. Daniel stood still. Noah stopped fussing, sniffled, and went quiet. After a moment, the impossible happened. The boy latched on, and the crying, the fierce, endless, helpless days finally stopped. The only sounds left were the soft crackle of the fire and the gentle swallowing of a baby finally nursing. Daniel's throat tightened. Claire said nothing. Her hand stroked Noah's neck, eyes half closed, as if some painful part of her had finally found peace, even if only for this moment. Daniel began, but his voice caught in his throat. He cleared his throat and tried again. He hadn't eaten like this since the hospital. He wouldn't eat anything. I thought I was going to lose him. Claire looked up, tears in her eyes, not broken, just deep. Daniel didn't move. He could only watch. She looked back at Noah. "But when I saw your message, something inside me, something broken, felt drawn to it, like maybe I could still give what I had left." Noah finished nursing and fell asleep on her chest, his body completely relaxed for the first time in days. Claire gently rocked him. Daniel stepped closer. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't even know what else to say." "You don't have to do that," she said gently, not taking her eyes off the baby. "Let me help." And in that quiet house, surrounded by silence and snow, a mother without a child held a child without a mother. And in that brief, beautiful moment, neither of them was alone. Claire placed Noah into a small cradle near the fireplace, something too pure to be covered in dust. She moved with quiet grace, as if afraid any sudden noise would wake not just the baby. When she turned back to Daniel, her expression was gentle but unreadable. "Would you like some tea?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. He hadn't planned to stay. But after all, leaving now felt wrong. He nodded. In the kitchen, the clinking of china and the whistle of the kettle filled the silence. Claire poured chamomile into 2 mismatched cups and handed one to him. They sat at the long wooden table, its surface scratched and worn but clean, as if someone had lovingly preserved its history. The warmth of the tea seeped into Daniel's hands, chasing away the chill that had settled in his bones since the night his world fell apart. "My wife was a nurse," he began, his voice low, strong, fierce. "Really, she used to say that labor wasn't even the hardest part of her shift." He gave a weak laugh. "She didn't make it. She hemorrhaged after Noah was born. They tried everything." Claire's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. Daniel stared into the steam rising from his cup. "After that, I quit my job. I'm a medic. I couldn't be near the ambulance anymore. Couldn't step into another sick room. Now it's just me and Noah, taking things day by day. Sometimes hour by hour." She nodded, silent for a moment. "My son," Claire finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "His name was Elliot. He passed away 2 months ago." For a while, he was warm in my arms. The next day, I couldn't wake him. Daniel looked up suddenly. The pain in her eyes was so real, it left no room for doubt. "I still hear him crying," she continued, "not just in dreams, but in running water, in the wind. Like a part of me refuses to believe he's gone. I never stopped breastfeeding. I just couldn't stop. Maybe if I kept going, he'd still need me." Daniel's chest ached with something beyond words. Claire admitted that sometimes she'd just pump milk to pretend. She donated what she could, but part of her still hoped that one day someone would need it, that she could give it to them instead of just storing it in the freezer. At that moment, she looked up at him, her eyes empty but resolute. Daniel swallowed hard. I didn't know how to say it, but I had to ask. His hand gripped the cup tightly. "Are you trying to use my son to replace your son?" Claire was completely still. In a heartbeat, Daniel regretted the question, but it had haunted him since the first time she held Noah. The way she held him, the tenderness, the heartbreaking familiarity. Then Claire let out a trembling sigh. Tears ran down her eyelashes. "No," she whispered. "No, I'm not replacing him. I know Noah isn't Elliot. I don't want him to be Elliot." She covered her face with one hand. "I need a reason to keep breathing, something to pour my love into when I don't know where else to put it." Her voice caught. Daniel felt the pain. All this care, all this milk, all this instinct, and nowhere to go. Daniel sat silently. The kettle on the stove ticked as it cooled. Then he slowly reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Not out of pity, but out of understanding. "I know what it's like to lose everything in one day," he softly said. "But maybe we don't have to go through it completely alone." Claire looked up at him, startled. "You don't know what this is," he continued, "but Noah needs you tonight, and I think maybe you need him too." And in that fragile, flickering kitchen, they sat together, two broken people held together by the warm possibility between them. The next morning, Daniel hesitated outside Claire's ivy-covered door. Snow blanketed the stone steps. Untouched, Noah was bundled in a blue fleece onesie, nestled close to Daniel's chest in a carrier. The baby's breath was light, but as the morning air touched his cheek, he whimpered. Claire opened the door before he could knock. "You're back," she said, her voice gentle but warm. Daniel nodded, shifting his weight. "He just slept through yesterday. I didn't know where else to go." "You did the right thing," she replied, stepping aside. "Come in. It's warmer today." Inside, the fire crackled softly. Claire wore a thick gray cardigan over a pale slip. Her blonde hair was loosely tied back, and though her face was still sad, her eyes brightened when she saw Noah. She reached out, and Daniel gently handed her the baby. Without hesitation, Claire sat in the rocking chair by the fireplace and unbuttoned her cardigan. Noah almost immediately latched on, sighing in relief as his tiny fingers curled into the knit of her sweater. Claire's eyes sparkled as she looked down at him. Daniel stood nearby, at first awkward, but as Noah closed his eyes, soothed by the gentle beat of Claire's heart, something in the room softened. "I'll fix that creaky window," Daniel muttered, stepping into the kitchen. Claire gave a weak smile but said nothing. And so the mornings began to return. Every day, Daniel carried Noah just before sunrise. Claire would wait, her hair damp from an early shower, wrapped in a clean blanket by the fire. As Noah fed and then drifted to sleep in her arms, Claire softly read old poems or hummed lullabies, some sad, some sweet. Daniel, never idle, found small things to fix a creaky cabinet hinge, a leaky faucet, the garden gate that never closed properly. He worked quietly, often pausing to glance at the sight of Noah snug on Claire's chest, his tiny hand resting over her heart. Claire never asked for help, and Daniel never asked for thanks. But each morning she noticed something. A fresh packet of jasmine green tea, her favorite, placed neatly on the countertop. She had never seen him do that before. He never mentioned it, but it was always there, set neatly beside the kettle as if it had always belonged. One Saturday morning, the kettle whistled just as Claire finished burping Noah. She stood up, gently placed him in the bassinet by the fire, and stepped into the kitchen. "You're spoiling me," she said, holding up the new tea bag. Daniel looked up after fixing a loose table leg. "It's not that," he replied. "I'm feeding my child. It's the least I can do." Claire smiled, but her voice was soft. "You don't have to fix everything to earn your place here." Daniel paused. He knew that, but fixing things was easier than fixing what was inside here. He said, patting his chest. That night, just as Claire went to sleep, a nightmare returned louder, sharper than before. In it, her child cried, and no one came. She woke up with a scream caught in her throat and tears soaking her pillow. The house was silent, but she felt the walls closing in. Then the door creaked. Daniel stood there, holding Noah on his shoulder. The baby squirmed and whimpered. Claire sat up, trembling. "I didn't mean to wake anyone." Daniel came in without a word. He stepped to her bedside, bent down, and took her hand. His palm was warm and steady. "I heard it," he said gently. "You're not alone tonight." Claire tried to speak, but her voice caught. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her forehead on Daniel's shoulder as he sat beside her. "I kept hearing him cry," she whispered. "Even when I was awake, Daniel didn't tell her it would pass. He didn't say she needed help. He just held her hand tight. You gave Noah peace." He said, "Let's give a little back to you." Noah whispered softly in Daniel's arms as if echoing those feelings. Claire closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself lean on someone else's presence without feeling guilty or scared. Daniel sat there with her until sleep took over, and the only sound left in the house was the gentle breathing of two souls beginning to heal. Morning sunlight had just started to peek through the treetops when a knock sounded at the door. Claire, holding Noah close to her chest, gently stirred him in her arms. She hummed softly, unaware that beyond the ivy-covered gate of her quiet home, the world was starting to intrude. The knocking came again, louder and more persistent. Claire froze. Daniel, finishing breakfast in the kitchen, quickly moved to the front door. When he opened it, he was met with bright camera flashes and the loud voices of 3 reporters. "Mr. Weller, is it true you're letting a grieving woman breastfeed your son? Did she steal the baby? Are you aware of the viral posts about Ms. Easton's mental health?" Daniel clenched his jaw. "Enough," he said firmly, stepping forward. But they kept going. "We have photos taken by neighbors of her breastfeeding the baby by the fireplace. The internet's calling her the millionaire with a ghost child." "Care to comment?" Claire appeared behind him, clutching Noah tighter, her face pale. Daniel turned around. "Go inside," he said gently. "No," Claire replied, her voice trembling but clear. "Let them ask what they came here for." Questions kept coming, sharp and loaded, about her mental health, Daniel's judgment as a father, and the blurry line between grief and motherhood. Claire didn't answer. She looked down at Noah, who shifted slightly, his tiny mouth opening in a sleepy sigh. That image, the fragile baby resting on her chest, sunlight shining on her golden hair, was captured by another camera. By noon, it was everywhere. Reclusive millionaire nursing a stranger's child. Claire Easton lost touch with reality. Single dad lets grieving millionaire care for his son. It didn't take long for the storm of criticism to spread online. People argued in the comments. Talk shows dissected every detail. Some defended her. Others mocked or condemned. Sensational headlines screamed in all caps while rumors spread like poison. Claire didn't go outside that day. She sat in the nursery with Noah, peacefully asleep on her lap, riding out the storm of opinions. Her face was calm, but her eyes were empty. That evening, Daniel came home with groceries. He set the bags down on the counter and saw she was still right where he'd left her. "They don't know you," he said softly. Claire didn't look up. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe you've made everything too blurry." Daniel took a step closer. "You're not." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They say you're pretending Noah is yours, that you've lost control." Daniel knelt down on one knee in front of her. "Look at me." She looked at him. He gently placed a hand over hers, covering Noah's tiny foot peeking out from under the blanket. "You lost someone too," Daniel said, "and you know how crazy that feels. But what you did isn't madness. It's compassion. You stepped in when no one else could, and because of you, my son is alive and thriving." She blinked, tears welling up. "Cla," he said, his voice now calmer, louder, as if speaking to more than just her. "You didn't replace your son with mine. You honored your son by helping someone else survive." That night, a new video surfaced. Daniel stood on Claire's porch, holding Noah in his arms. Claire stood beside him, barefaced, hair pulled back, silent but proud. Reporters had returned. So had the cameras. "I want to say something," Daniel declared. They were silent. His wife had died giving birth to this little boy. He had done everything possible to keep his son alive, but nothing worked until he met Claire. He looked down at Noah, then at the crowd. Everyone was quick to judge. But if any of you have ever lost someone you love, if you've ever woken up wishing for just one more moment of life, you'd understand. He turned to Claire, then reached out and wrapped his arm around her shoulder. "She's not crazy. She's the only one who saved my son when the world said there was nothing left to try." Cameras clicked. "She's not pretending. She's not lost. She's the only mother my son has ever known." Then, in front of the whole world, Daniel did something unexpected. He pulled Claire close and hugged her, not out of obligation, not for drama, but with deep respect. She closed her eyes. For the first time since the headlines broke, she let herself breathe. The image spread faster than any rumor before it. A broken but brave man and woman holding a child between them. Not perfect, no pretending, just three souls clinging to love in its rawest, most human form. The frost began to thaw as Claire turned her computer back on. She hadn't touched the keyboard for months. Her final manuscript was left unfinished, abandoned after her son passed away. But now, as sunlight streamed through tall windows and the house smelled faintly of oats and daisies, she felt something stirring. Not urgency, not exactly inspiration, just a desire to speak again. She opened a blank document and typed slowly. A blog called "The Kindness of the Unborn," a phrase Daniel had whispered one late night while they sat on the porch, Noah sleeping between them. Claire began sharing brief thoughts on the quiet miracle of holding a child once more, the fear alongside healing and a stubborn, strange joy returning in small moments. Noah's tiny hand clutching her shirt, Daniel's soft giggles at breakfast, the smell of warm clothes folded next to her desk. The blog first caught the attention of readers who knew her as a reclusive author, then from mothers and fathers who had lost someone and survived to tell the story. Claire did not talk about wealth or fame. She wrote about human things, about pain, milk-stained blankets, sleepless nights, and how love can show up in unexpected ways. And every time someone left a comment like, "This made me cry," or "I needed this today," she felt the ache in her chest ease just a little. As for Daniel, he returned to part-time work. On his days off, he'd come to Claire's early, holding Noah in one arm and a grocery bag in the other. They settled into a rhythm. Mornings walking Noah around neighborhood trails, afternoons baking together. Claire started making banana bread Noah loved. Evenings curled up on the couch as Claire read her draft aloud while Daniel washed bottles nearby. One Sunday morning, when the trees outside glittered with pale green buds and the air smelled like spring, Claire closed her laptop and stared at the page in front of her. She had finished Chapter 1. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And it was whole. Daniel quietly entered the room, Noah resting against his shoulder, having fallen asleep after finishing a bottle. Claire turned to him, her heart suddenly pounding with quiet pride. "I did it," she said. Daniel blinked. "That chapter?" She nodded. He stepped closer, leaning in to glance at the screen. "What's it called? The First Cry?" Claire answered. "About the night you knocked on my door." He smiled softly. "Fitting." Claire hesitated. I also wrote a dedication. He looked at her. Can I see? She gently turned the screen toward him. At the top, clean and centered, the words read, dedicated to Noah, the child who saved 2 lost hearts. Daniel held his breath. He looked down at his son, then back at Claire. That's what you mean, she said softly. He saved me, and I think maybe both of us. Daniel sat beside her. Noah was now nestled between them. Claire's hand found the child's back, gently patting in rhythm. Daniel's hand covered hers. No romantic words were spoken, no whispered promises, just a growing mutual understanding that their lives had been broken and then stitched back together by something incredibly fragile and kind. Claire leaned back, smiling softly. I don't know what this story is yet, but I want to keep writing it. Daniel glanced aside. The book. She shook her head gently. The house. Outside. The wind softly rustling new leaves. Inside. Noah sighed and burrowed deeper into the arms that now belonged to both of them, each once believing they'd never have a future again. The air thick with the sweetness of blooming lilacs as Noah stood at the edge of the lawn, his little legs trembling, fists clenched at his sides. Claire knelt nearby, arms open wide, her heart beating faster than she expected. Daniel stood behind the toddler, hands out but not touching, letting Noah find his own rhythm. One step, wobble, another step, then suddenly leaning forward, and Claire lunged just in time to catch him in her arms. Noah shouted with delight. Daniel laughed behind them, clapping softly. Tears welled in Claire's eyes before she even realized. She kissed Noah's curly hair and whispered, You did it. Daniel stepped forward, bending beside them, his voice gentle. Every step he takes is a part of us healing. Claire nodded, pressing her cheek to Noah's. Not just walking. Moving forward, that night, after Noah had bathed and slept in the crib beside Claire's bed, she went into the room untouched for nearly a year, the room of her son. The walls still soft with cloud and star murals. The crib neatly made, though it hadn't felt a child's warmth for months. The scent of lavender faint in the air. She moved slowly, fingertips brushing over the bookshelf, then the wardrobe. Her hand paused at the top drawer. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small gift box she had never opened. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, and carefully lifted the lid. Inside was a tiny embroidered bib made of soft white cotton, gentle as a whisper, a note attached for the first messy giggles. Claire pressed the cloth to her lips. It was meant for a child she had never been able to feed, a gift that had quietly waited through her pain. And now, maybe it had found its purpose. The next morning, Daniel arrived, carrying Noah in a baby carrier wrapped in a blanket, his cheeks rosy from sleep. Claire met them at the door, holding a box. I found something, she said, curious. Daniel stepped inside. Claire opened the box and gently handed it to him. Daniel looked down and saw the bib. It's for him, he quietly asked. Claire nodded. It was never used before. But I think it's time now. She pressed the cloth into his hand. Daniel's throat tightened as he spoke those words. Are you sure? Claire's voice trembled, but her eyes stayed calm. Love isn't limited by blood or time. I think my son would want this. Daniel nodded, gripping the bib tightly. Then I'll treasure it, just like I treasure you. Noah, as if understanding, reached out his chubby hand and babbled happily. Claire smiled through her tears. We're building something here. Not replacing, just continuing. That afternoon, they dressed Noah in the little bib, and the boy proudly wore it as he toddled around the kitchen, leaving cookie crumbs and laughter behind. For the first time, in the house that once echoed with absence, the sound of tiny footsteps filled every corner. The bookstore smelled faintly of paper and possibility. A year had passed since the darkest winter of their lives. And now Claire and Daniel sat side by side at the long wooden table under soft yellow lights. Their new stack of books, Kindness Fed Us, stood tall beside them. The cover featured a watercolor sketch of a man, a woman, and a small child holding hands under a shared umbrella. Noah sat between them on a small chair, his legs swinging, colored pencils scattered around his open picture book. He drew pictures that captured the mischief of a 3-year-old, but today, he wore a shirt that said, Written with Love. The crowd had been silent since the door opened. young couples, single parents, grandparents, even nurses and grief counselors had been following their story online. People came for the book, but many stayed for the people behind it. Claire signed a copy with her elegant scroll, then handed it to a young mother who whispered, "Your story saved me. Thank you." Daniel was quietly talking with an older man who had lost his wife years before. "Grief changes you," Daniel said, "but kindness brings you back." The heart of the book was a story of loss and love found in the most unexpected way. In each chapter, Claire and Daniel recounted the year they met, nights spent crying endlessly, messages from a stranger, the shared silence in the kitchen, difficult mornings and healing evenings. Each chapter ends with quiet reflection, and the final chapter closes with the words, "Not everyone who gives birth is a mother. Not everyone who loses their life partner loses hope. Family doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real." As the crowd thinned, a young reporter from a local paper stepped forward, holding a recorder, her voice curious but kind. "You've shared a very personal story. May I ask a simple but maybe important question?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Ask anything." She pointed to the three of them, then asked, "So, what are you two to each other now?" Claire looked at Daniel. He looked back. Noah reached out without thinking and grabbed both of their hands. Claire squeezed his pinky fingers, smiled, and turned back to the reporter. "We're a family," she said softly, "built on kindness and a child who never says no to love." The reporter blinked, her eyes softening. "That's beautiful." Claire bent down and kissed Noah's hair. Daniel placed his other hand over hers. They never needed names. Not husband or wife, not a substitute mom or borrowed child. What they had was stronger than any title. It was presence, effort, choice. Outside, snow began to fall, gently and slowly. Claire watched it hit the bookstore window, remembering the first time she opened the door to find a man holding a crying baby and nothing else. That was a different world. But today, they had warmth, peace, purpose, and above all, they had each other. As the last books were signed and Noah started to get sleepy, Claire prepared the pen while Daniel cradled their son in his arms. They stepped out into the snowy night, hand in hand, heart to heart. A family isn't born, it's chosen. And with every step, every shared breath, they rewrote what love could look like. This story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple out and change the entire course of someone's life. Through pain, misunderstanding, and moments of deep silence, the characters in this journey showed us the power of patience, vulnerability, and second chances. If you found yourself rooting for the main character, if their quiet strength or fragile hope touched something in you, then take a moment to send them your support in the comments. What would you say to them if they were sitting across from you right now? And what step do you think they should take next? Maybe it's time for them to stop running. Maybe it's time to believe they're worthy of love and belonging again. If stories like this remind you of what really matters, don't forget to subscribe to Touching Tales Hub. We bring you deeply moving, soul-stirring narratives that celebrate resilience, compassion, and the beautiful messiness of being human. Your support helps keep these stories alive for all of us who need them, who